I interrupt this regularly scheduled podcast to bring you a special couple of announcements. First off, I am almost ready to bring you the hot truth about hormone therapy. This is the only guide of its kind. It's agnostic, it's objective, it includes everything, and it is a doozy because the hormone therapy belief prescribing system runs the gamut from estrogen and progesterone levels that you had when you were 25 and periods for life, to people who don't even want you to eat a chickpea because they believe it has too much phytoestrogen and therefore too much estrogen. That's how scared they are of estrogen. This is my work of the last 6 years, and I have boiled down a ton of research, and I've taken a bird's eye view and I've boiled it all down to 5 video guides, 5 PDFs, and under 3 hours, you can get the lay of the land and you can be empowered to make decisions for yourself. So check the link in the show notes. That will get you on the waiting list, or it will get you right there if it's launched, fingers crossed, by the time you hear this message. And if hormone therapy isn't your thing, and it's not everyone's thing, in fact, it's not most people's thing, I have completely updated my Fix It Fast perimenopause list. This is the thing that's going to help you feel better by the weekend. I know that's a bold claim, and if it's Friday, maybe it's too bold. But I have put together the special sauce mix of what Hot Flash Hanks does here. These are 14 evidence, human experience, and expert-backed ways. Things you should be doing during perimenopause to feel better. And they're all really doable, and they're all things that help me. I believe in them so powerfully. It's a beautifully designed guide. It's free. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. That'll get you on my emailing list. That'll get you on the list for the hormone therapy guide too. These are just 2 things I put together for you. I think, I'm not a doctor. That's very clear. I'm a journalist, but I have a special space in that I can see everything that's going on and point out to you what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and then helps you figure out where you fit into it. Thanks for listening, and now back to the podcast. I'm Anne-Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hot Flash Hank.
You're all a woman to me. All right, Anne-Marie.
It's great to talk to you, and you are someone that I have come across on social media and just really liked your style and your groundedness. And I can't remember what made me think like I need to speak to her, but I think it was just like repeated exposure. And I just feel like this conversation has gotten so crazy, and we need some people to balance this out, because well, first of all, I don't want to focus too much on division or whatever, but when you're online, what do you notice is happening to this thing we call menopause, which you have said is your superpower, and I want to talk about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So much divisiveness and so much polarization during a phase of life that what we need is safety, and we need, as you said, like groundedness, and we need somebody to be this sounding board and accompaniment. Like that's what we need. We need to be accompanied through this transition. Right. And when I started, and I think that you and I went through menopause pretty much at the same time. I might have completed it a little bit before you, I think. I'm not sure. But when I started desperately looking for something online about menopause that wasn't strictly medical, that wasn't strictly fear mongering, I wasn't finding a whole lot. And it was really disheartening, because I was also, at the same time as I was going through the hormonal event, I was also having like a huge trauma event in my life because, for various reasons, maybe we'll get into it. And I was also going through a spiritual awakening all at the same time, like all the dimensions, right?
Yes. It was a lot. It was
a lot.
Rocky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I can say, and I was discussing this with my friend last night, it was the most meaningful, disruptive, important event of my life. And it's like it was way more impactful and traumatic and wonderful than even my son's birth.
Wow.
Which is saying a lot.
Wow.
For me personally, like not as a mother, not as
just as a woman. Yeah. What you've been
through.
As
a woman, as an individual, menopause was the single most important, impactful event of my life. for sure.
Okay, so hearing you say that makes me understand why I get like triggered when it's treated as a purely this terrible physical deficiency deterioration event. Like I get physically upset about it for this very reason. For this very reason. It's just not acknowledging the truth of the enormity of it. So thank you for just giving words to that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And it took me years to get to these words because in the beginning, I was just like feeling all these things, right? And to get back to your question, when I started going through it, it was very, very traumatic for me. And so I was like grasping at straws, trying to find resources to not only explain, but also give meaning to what I was going through. And to have somebody who could be a guide, who could be a mentor, who could be something else than here's your HRT, basically.
Yeah.
And that's how I found Jane Hardwick Collins, who, I think you follow and love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she became my mentor later on. And I found also Red School and Alexandra Pope. And then I found the book Wise Power. So I slowly pieced together, that thread of the existential, spiritual side of the menopause transition. And then on the other side, because I was going through so much trauma and so much dysregulation, I started tracking everything that had to do with somatics, with, the intersection between trauma and menopause, with and then the other part was leadership. So as we age and as women especially, we get to this point where, or at least I got to a point where, I was like 47, 48. I was like, I'm at the top of my game. I've got my parenting down. I've got like my work leadership down. And then suddenly, poof, you're hit with menopause. And it's like, snakes and ladders.
Yeah.
Snakes and ladders. And you go all the way to the bottom of the game and you're like, what happened? What happened? And after going through the transition, I think that who I wanted to be in the world and how I wanted to help other women be in the world radically, radically changed. I've always been a feminist. I've always been somebody who believed in women's rights. But then when I got to this age, I started feeling ageism. I started feeling this really, kind of like covert, not really said, not really overtly, communicated way of, being treated completely differently. And it happened within a couple of years. And I started feeling, wow, I'm excluded. There's exclusion for sure. For sure. And that really hit hard as well, because I had always been somebody who was like well respected. I did some public speaking. I always had like leadership roles. I was always sought out. I'm somebody who was always handed jobs and projects and mandates, like for decades. And then suddenly, I'm passed over, I'm looked over. I'm not, I don't get so many phone calls anymore for things. And it hurts. It really hurts. And I don't know, what your experience of that was, but my experience was that I started rolling up into a little ball, and I started really feeling like, wow, like people don't like me anymore, don't want me. And that's when I started understanding ageism. This is like the effect of ageism on me.
Well, it's a weird internal and external factor. I don't know how I feel about it, truly, because I really believe that where you put your attention, things will grow. And so I've always been kind of like la, 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 la about it. But I have applied for a couple of things lately that I was perfect for and haven't even gotten anything. And I'm like, oh, is this it? Like, is this what it is? It's like, you can see that I've been working this amount of time, there's a lot to figure out. Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you went through, like your trauma, your awakening, your menopause all rolled into one? How did it play out?
And it was rolled into one. That's exactly how it happens. I spent about a decade in the research sector, and I was always in like very competitive research ecosystems, which was, and I only had a master's degree and I had like literally the best job that I could get in the sector that I was in. And I was only 47, 48, and it was during COVID. And I thought like, wow, I don't want to spend another 10 years basically stagnating. So I started this internal process and I figured out, okay, I'm going to change sectors. And at the time I was in a relationship, which I thought was going to be a long-term relationship. And so I changed sectors. I got another job. And when I got this job, like not very long afterwards, this person broke up with me in a way that created trauma, like diagnosed trauma later on. And at the same time that I was starting this job, I discovered slowly that the person who was my boss is a huge narcissist. And I was literally embedded in a toxic work relationship. And then my menopause symptoms started because I was 49.
Yeah.
And so everything just started spiraling in this downward, horrible, horrible spiral. And I had all the symptoms, all of them times 25 in intensity. So I wasn't sleeping, like barely at all. I had bad rumination. I was having, 20, 30 hot flashes a day. I was having night sweats. Hair was falling out. I was looking at my face. My skin was aging drastically fast. I was like scratching all over. I had depression. And what really scared me is at one point I had suicidal ideation, and that had never, ever happened to me. I'd never been somebody, I went through bouts of depression, but I'd never been suicidal. And that's when I was like, okay, this is serious. I need to do something. And that's when I reached out to my doctor, and I just watched a documentary that was made in Quebec that was about, menopause and HRT. And I said, I think I need hormonal replacement therapy. And I was so lucky because she actually said, I think you're right. I don't know how to really dose it for you, but I can prescribe it to you. And if you're okay with, kind of like experimenting with the dosage, then you're right. I think that's what you need. And so I was very, very lucky. And I started taking it, and I was on sick leave for, over 6 months, during which time I was able to really come back to myself a little bit and to start to not unravel, but like to make sense of what was happening, and to start on this path that I've been on ever since. But it was very painful. It was very traumatic. There was some times when I really thought that I wasn't going to make it. It was a very, very dark night of the soul period of time.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of references in psychology to this sort of descent that is involved, but I don't think people realize how scary it can get. And I don't think people talk about it very much, about suicidal ideation. I had it as well. It's terrifying. And to have it for the first time, and to think about it, and to really consider it, it's really hard. It's like, I don't know what else to say. So I hope anyone listening knows that we've been there and we know how scary it is. Interesting to me that you went on hormone. See, this is why I love talking to people like you, and also the Red School that you mentioned, Jane Hardwick Collins. These are not people who are rejecting any sort of hormone therapy or any way to get through menopause. There is no either or, because the real woo-woo side of it, and there are people saying you don't need hormones to get through, and that doesn't appeal to me. I'm not on hormones, but it doesn't appeal to me. And so it's so cool that you're doing this work and focusing on the journey and focusing on the, the transformations and then the initiations while hormone therapy worked for you. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that? One can nourish the other, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the thing that's interesting is before I went through menopause, I was pretty convinced that I was not going to need it.
Right.
Because I was under the impression of, of the Y study, which was still floating around a little bit in my consciousness. And I was like, oh no, I don't need that. I'm going to do yoga, and I'm going to do breath work, and I'm going to do all these things. And then when you're hit with the reality of you cannot function in the world, and literally you're thinking of unaliving yourself, you think twice, and so I started to get more information. And at the time, that, so this was like 2021. I think it was kind of like one of the heights of like all the HRT information coming out, and a lot of the influencers, I think, like started around 2020, 2021, 2022. So there was a lot more information that was coming out. And as I was looking through the information and I was feeling, is this for me? I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. And if worse comes to worse, I'm going to go off of it if it doesn't work or whatever. But it worked really well for me. And I'm very lucky because it could have not worked, for women who are very highly sensitive, like I am. Sometimes it really doesn't work for people who are neuroatypical, which I suspect I am. It doesn't work for them sometimes. So I was really, really lucky. I found my dosage within, I would say, 3 months. So estradiol and progesterone bioidentical. I started sleeping, which was huge. I started to have less and then no symptoms of depression, rumination, suicidal ideation, etc. And so within, I would say 4 to 5 months, I wasn't back to normal, but I was on a basic, like on a, how can I put it? I was on a platform of calm and stability. I had this form of stability in myself where I could actually be functional, which I hadn't been for, many months at that, before prior. And I was also on sick leave, so I wasn't working. I could actually take care of myself. I could actually sleep. I could actually go for walks, be in nature, all these things. So for me, it provided this stability. And without this stability, there's nothing really that you can do with your life. So when people get to this point and they still say, no, I'm not going to do HRT, I'm going to do other things, my hope, and my conversations with them, because I have some clients who don't want to go on HRT for ethical reasons or for reasons of like, oh, I don't trust it, it's pharmaceuticals and all these things. And what I say to them is whatever works for you. And it can be antidepressants. And it can be, taking a pharmaceutical for libido, whatever works at this period of your life. And once you get to stability, then you can make another decision, if or not, or keep on taking the same thing. Like at this point, I don't see myself not being on HRT for the rest of my life, unless, some study comes out that says, past 65 or past this age, you really shouldn't take it because it becomes something that's toxic for you, then I would consider not being on it. But honestly, for the stability that it provides me and at the moment, like a lot of studies show that there's like long-term health benefits, I don't see myself not being on it. And then a couple of years later, I added testosterone as well to the mix.
All right.
Yeah.
And how did that make you feel?
Oh my God. So estradiol and progesterone really took me to, I would say, 80%, energy and cognition and being able to live a fruitful life. But I was still missing this like 15 to 20%. And it was mostly around cognition, memory. Words were not coming as fast as they would before. And also like general energy, general sort of like willingness to do things, to start new projects and things like that. And so the testosterone really took me all the way to, I would say, 95%.
Oh, that's awesome. And I loved what you said about pharmaceuticals too, because another weird feature of the all hormone therapy all the time discussion is that you're not supposed to take antidepressants. You're not supposed to take pharmaceuticals. They're trying to get you on those because they make more money. That was a video I saw the other day. You can't make money with bioidentical hormones, even though it's like a $6 billion a year business or something like that. So that's another thing that just doesn't serve us. Like, I just want women to be able to have whatever they need, right? Like just anything that we need that we can find, whatever floats your boat, isn't going to set you back. So what I love when you talk about perimenopause as being a crucial initiation that enables us to be born. But you said life is a series of continuous transitions, and that is so awesome. And transitions are always hard. And this is one of the biggest, and it's crucial, and it allows us to be reborn. Just tell me what you mean by that.
The only way that I can really talk about it is using the myth of Inanna, because after the fact, I started looking for meaning of what I had gone through and to try and find some kind of some kind of a framework.
Okay.
I'm a big geek and I spent like 10 years in research, so I love frameworks and I was trying to find that. And so after the fact, so this was like 2022, 2023, I started to really just go into myth and goddesses and things like that. And I found the myth of Inanna, which is 3,000 or 4,000 years old. And she is the original goddess of life and death. And her story is the story of female initiation. We have Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, which is like very well known, but that's like very masculine. That's like the masculine initiation. But we don't have a whole lot for what we go through as women. And so the myth of Inanna is basically the goddess Inanna has to go down into the underworld. And to go to the underworld, she has to pass through these series of portals. And at every portal, she has to take off a piece of clothing, a piece of jewelry, something that, is an ornament. And all of these are symbolisms of what we have as status symbols in this world, right? And finally, she's in the underworld, and she is in front of her sister, Ereshkigal, who is pregnant. And there's a whole backstory. The myth is very, very interesting. It has a lot of like more specific symbolism. And so Inanna is in front of her sister, and they're not in good terms. And Ereshkigal basically looks at her and, she dies. Inanna dies. And then she's put on the meat hook for 3 days. That's very important. So she's on the meat hook. She's dead. Literally, she's dead. This is the first story of resuscitation, way before Jesus. And after a while, there are these beings that come and wake her up, essentially bring her back to life. And then she ascends again, and she ascends onto the earth. So it's really this U-shaped trajectory. And this is exactly what I went through. Exactly. So when I started to have the symptoms, I was starting to go down. Progressively, I started to be stripped from, my cognition, stripped from my energy, stripped from my even my sanity. I can literally say that. And I died. And there was this night, which was the darkest night. And it's just before I reached out to my doctor, where I was pretty convinced that I was going to die, or that I was going to be taken to a psych ward, and that I was going to lose my son, I was going to lose my house, I was going to lose my job and everything. And it was literally that point of like I was on the meat hook.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
absolutely on the meat hook. And it lasted for quite a long time. And I know women who are on the meat hook for months and years. Also, it can be very short, but it can be a very, very long time. And for some women, it could be like this. So the U shape itself is going to be very different for every single woman. It's going to be very unique, but it's always going to have this shape of like, you're going to descend, you're going to be stripped, you're going to die, you're going to be reborn, and you're going to ascend. And the cool part is in the ascension, that's where you can choose the things that you want to keep or that you want to recreate for yourself. And how are you going to be showing up in your life going forward, right? And you are transformed. This is like literally where you get completely transformed.
I love it. First of all, when she's taking the things off, I'm thinking of all the safety blanket stuff I used to need, like the suitcase of supplements that I would travel home to Canada with, or the stuff I needed in my suitcase if I would travel, or all the things I needed. I do notice now that I'm needing less and less of that. But then it's also metaphorical, right? Those are all the things you're kind of taking off so that you can function. And then of course you're going to be laid bare in the meat hook, because it does feel like that, right? When you're going through this, I had to stop drinking because I was never like, I had a drinking problem, but when you can't drink because your health won't let you drink, and you can't eat some food, some chocolate or like when you can't do anything, you feel very naked.
Yeah.
That's part of it too. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's a really great way. I always say the heroine's journey, and it feels incomplete because it is very masculine. So what do you do when you work with people, and when you're talking about somatic work and getting into the body, like how do those sorts of things help us at this time?
To answer this question, I just want to take us back to this U-shaped initiation, because for me, I had always been very disembodied. Actually, I was living very much in my head. I've always been very brainy, very nerdy, loved science and was like very existing pretty much here for a long, long time. When I went through this initiation, I did not have any choice but to reconnect with my body. Even though it was like the most painful thing, I had to reconnect with my body because everything was happening in my body. And at one point, I realized, wow, I'm so disconnected and I'm so scared of feeling. I was terrified of feeling the grief, the sadness, the overwhelming feelings that I was, because I was going through a breakup at the same time as I was going through PTSD, at the same time as I was going through menopause, and all the things. And so, and all of that lives in the body. Emotions are biological events, and they have a very, very strong influence on our soma, on our biology. So that's when I started to really, and when I started to get interested in trauma, trauma happens in the body. And so I really, like, everything for me was pointing towards the body, the soma, body, mind. And that's when I started reading also all the new science, Gabor Mate, And everyone who really is making this point in this case that there is no separation between body and mind. And I had always been very, there's the mind, and the mind is over the body, and the mind has to control this like meat puppet body kind of thing, which is very patriarchal. It's very, this hierarchy of mind over body is very, very, very toxic. And once you are in this experience that is so somatic, even though it's like super uncomfortable, it's very somatic, I couldn't help but have so much tenderness for my body, so much tenderness for everything that my body was going through. And so for me, the body is really became the portal, became the entrance towards the experience of what is menopause, what is aging. So one of the most beautiful practices, which is still one of the first ones that I teach my clients, I still do myself a lot, is called the five senses reality. It's very, very simple. And it's basically to just, put yourself into a state where you are diving inside of your soma, inside of your sensations, and you start identifying things that you're going to be anchoring with your five senses. It's very powerful because it uses the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain. And you can then transfer your experience from what you're going through now into something completely different, and you can orient yourself towards something different. And another beautiful practice is, again, it's like the 5 points, 5 anchoring points. So it's sensations, body posture, breath, emotional texture, and thoughts. And what I learned is that once we are able to dive into the world of the body, into the world of sensations, we are then able to start observing them, being them, and experiencing them. So there's not just one way of diving into that. It's not just you're diving into it and you're lost and you're like overwhelmed by all these emotions and sensations. There are ways to start exploring all of this, which is very, very, very powerful. And that led me to coaching certification, which weaves together all of these approaches also with internal family systems, which is extremely powerful because, as you probably know,
Explain it, please, because we've never talked about it on the podcast.
Really?
I've talked about my family constellations experience, but I've never talked about, which is different. This is different. So yeah, please do talk about it.
Yeah, internal family systems. So I'm not an expert. I'm not a IFS practitioner, but I do weave it into, I do parts work in my work. And basically it's this, so Dick Schwartz, which is the originator. And it's basically this amazing science where we all have parts inside of ourselves. We're not just like one unified being. We have all of these different parts. So we have like inner children, we have inner parents, we have all kinds of inner parts that are all either in communication or not in communication with each other. Some of them have been exiled, some of them are more prominent, and some of them are in the shadows, like we haven't met them yet. And I don't know what your experience was like, but when I was going through the initiation, a lot of my developmental trauma from my childhood came up. And science explains this because once we start having less estradiol and less allopregnol, the parts of the brain that actually are able to, keep all of that under wraps and is protected by the anti-inflammatory effect of estradiol, it keeps everything kind of like, down pat. But once that starts fluctuating, all of that stuff starts reemerging. And for me, a huge part of the work was to really care for my inner child or my inner children. I have like a few. And when I started doing this work and really caring for my inner child and inner children later on, it changed everything because I realized that my inner 3-year-old, 4-year-old, my inner baby was sometimes really running the show in my life as an adult. And I didn't know. I had no idea. It's because I was so disembodied. I was separated from these parts. But once I started working with them, taking care of them, and identifying, the wise adult, the wise woman inside of me, the goddesses inside of me, and all these other parts, then I started to realize, wow, like, to have this inner unification, this inner wholeness really allowed me to mature into the woman that I think that I'm becoming, at 54 years old. Whereas before, and it took me a while to realize this, but I was stuck in this very young, immature maiden phase. that I was just stuck in it. And that's also what menopause does, is really it allows you to untether yourself from this phase of your life and to allow you to move into a phase of more maturity, which is the mange. I love the mange, which, you probably know from Jane's work.
No, the mange. Tell me. I think I've heard her say it. What do you tell me? Just tell us a little bit.
Yeah. So the mange is this archetype of womanhood that is in between the mother and the crone. So we always have this idea in society that it's like the triple goddess. You have the child, sorry, the maiden, the mother, and the crone. But the fact of the matter is now we can, theoretically we can live until we're 100. So we have this whole 25 years of a missing archetype. We're not mothers anymore. And we're not yet the crones. She introduced from her lineage, from her teacher, the archetype of the mage, who is also the harvest queen, the enchantress. Her season is autumn. And so she is this incredible woman who is, living in the abundance of her gifts, who has maybe, left behind a little bit the role of active mothering, who is not yet a grandmother or a crone. And she is like this healer. She's a magician. And she just like really brings her gifts into the world with full fruition.
Wow. I find like when you talked about the maiden, sometimes women in their 40s and through no fault of their own, I just have a little bit of a reaction because they're trying so hard. And I just see myself. And there's a lot of like conversations and justifications, and I was eating this and that, but I'm going to get back on track. And I want to stop them and say, like, you don't have to do this, but you can't do that. You can't do that because we were there and you know that they're going to figure it out. But I have noticed that. And I think when I was in my 40s, I didn't love hanging around women that were my age. And I think there might be like a really strong connection and maybe like a little repelling going on between the people who were so close to the transition. I wonder. I don't know because it was so close for us and it's like so close for them. I don't know. I'd like to explore it a little bit. Just not brief. I hate to say briefly, but like the spiritual awakening was a huge part for me. I guess this happened to you during COVID, did it? Yeah. And I don't know. For me, it was during COVID, and I'm not a anti-vaxxer. I'm not a pro-vaxxer, but I didn't understand journalism. All of a sudden, it didn't make any sense to me the way journalism was being done. I didn't understand why the Prime Minister of Canada was saying horrible things about people who just had different beliefs. I literally felt my brain fracturing over some of the things that were happening. And that on top of everything else was insane. But you can have a spiritual transformation or awakening at any time. Just what was that like for you a little bit? It's very, very discombobulating.
Yeah, it is. So
what does that mean to you?
What does it mean? So,
because we have just to like before, there were a lot of people having a spiritual awakening at this time, and there were a lot of people talking, and I still can't stand this kind of thing where it's like, well, they're in the 3D and they're in the 5D and I'm in the 5D, and I can't stand any of it. It's just, I just felt like the scales fell from my eyes and I saw the world in a different way. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No. And it happens differently for everyone. And I think that for me, there was definitely, and there's still some scales falling from my eyes. I think it's normal as, our hormonal levels vary. I think that we suddenly see the bullshit. We don't have the rose-colored glasses anymore. That's one part of it. I think that as younger women, because the estradiol is so strong in our bodies, we have this attunement and this nurturing, which borders on trauma response. Because honestly, like in a patriarchal society, women are essentially being extracted from.
Yeah.
In many ways, as mothers, as workers, as partners, we're being extracted from. We're a natural resource, essentially. So, and at one point, and we kind of play into that. We fawn into this because we don't have a choice, because we are in a regime where we are, that's how we survive, is because we play the game, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we play the game until we can't play the game anymore. And that's when menopause usually happens, and it can be, pretty dramatic. And that's when the scales fall from our eyes and we start seeing things like, oh my God, like, how did I never see this before? Well, it's because we had, a nice level of hormones. So that's like I would say the biological side of things. But the spiritual side of things, for me, the way that it happened is suddenly I saw the world in a very raw way, without any rosy, coloring. And I started to experience these. I can only call them uploads and downloads. Like I suddenly was having these knowings. I was suddenly knowing things. And I was like, where is this coming from? And I started writing. I started doing a lot of writing. And a few months later, I would read exactly what I had written, but written by another woman in a completely other part of the world. And I started having all of these synchronicities of things that I was thinking. And sometimes I felt like it was really coming from the earth. Yeah, it was really coming up through me. And sometimes I felt like it was being downloaded into me. It was two very different things. And I thought I was going crazy. I was like, okay, this is probably, menopause broke my brain, something happened. But as I started, experiencing it and accepting it and writing about it and just writing all these thoughts and all these ideas and all this inspiration, I started seeing resonance in other writers and other women and other people who were really thinking about these things. And I started really feeling like there is some kind of a unified field that humans tap into and that women tap into a very specific, I don't know what to call it, layer or texture of it or something. But there is this universal intelligence, for lack of a better word, that once you open yourself to it, you have access to it. That's how I can really describe it. And I tried to push it away for a really long time because I was like, I'm a researcher. I wrote scientific articles, peer reviewed, like how can this be happening? But once I started to accept it and to just accept it at face value without trying to put fancy words to it or trying to make it more spiritual than it was, I started to just accept that there is a lot more to life and there is a lot more to the human experience than just being in bodies moving through space. There's a lot more.
There's a lot. I mean, this isn't even that woo-woo. It's quantum entanglement theory. It's physics. It's like people have won Nobel Prizes for this work. And we've been experiencing it in our entire lives. When you think about someone and the phone would ring, you think about someone, there's a text, like I hear it described all different ways, but someone described it as a tapestry that you can't see, or a large quilt that you can't see, that is just made of, connections. And it's beautiful. I love that the concept of the field has been a through line of the show Shrinking on Apple TV, which I really love that show. And the old crusty character played by Harrison Ford, he's talking about the field, and everyone else is rolling their eyes at them. But I'm like, wow, this is really interesting that this is on a show like this. Obviously the guy who created that show believes in it. And how can you not, once you start to realize it? You have to be careful how you talk about it and who you talk about it with, because people can roll their eyes, even though I want to scream, it's science. Actually, it's science.
And you know what? I don't really care who rolls their eyes.
I love it.
I don't care anymore.
You're the dumb one. No, I sometimes do catch myself thinking that. Like, why are you rolling your eyes at me? You're the one who won't even accept this thing that's so obvious. That's churlish of me. But, yeah. Well, this is beautiful talking to you about all this. And if people want to work with you, is it like a coaching situation? You do it online? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, it's online coaching. If people are in Montreal, I do it in person as well. And yeah, my website is emergence.co. I have also like a really beautiful community on Facebook called the Midlife Temple, where women assemble. And that's where I share actually most of my inner workings and teachings and things like that. It's mostly on Facebook. And yeah, I'm a coach and I love to work with women who really want to get unstuck in their menopause transition and who want to be the leaders that this world needs. That's really who I'm for.
Yeah. Okay. Just some parting words of wisdom for those who are going through it right now.
My goodness. Everything passes. It's really hard right now. You are probably not seeing the gift, but there is absolutely a gift. And one day you will see what it is. Right now, just hang on. Do whatever it takes, whatever works.
Hang in there and stay with us. Thank you so much, Luce. That's beautiful. I'm so happy to connect with you.
So am I. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Hot Flash Inc. was created and is hosted by Anne-Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Anne-Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hot Flash Inc. Media.